Cool. Hello. We'll just give everybody a moment and we'll get started. Here we go. So I'm Angie from Education Angels. We are a home-based education company, and we offer these free webinars every month to our parents, our educators, and to anybody in our community who is interested. So welcome everybody. It's so great to have you here. So I shall just share my screen and we'll get started. So tonight's webinar is around supporting your child's well-being through change, because right now many of us, particularly over this last year, have experienced a tremendous amount of change. And for all of us, not just for children, for all of us, change can be very unsettling and very challenging. But for children in particular, it can impact on their general well-being. It can affect their behaviour. It can certainly create a huge amount of stress for parents who are potentially already under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. You know, maybe you're suffering from lockdown, as many of us have over the last 12 months, or a huge change in family circumstances. I know people have lost their homes, lost their jobs, which has forced change upon us. Also for children, they're either starting or stopping and restarting childcare or kindy or school, moving house, losing a family member, or having a new baby. So, you know, remember, change is good. It's not all bad. It's not, you know, change is actually a big part of life, and as adults and children, we need to be building our resilience and our ability to cope with change, because the one thing we do know is that change is inevitable. So this is why we've got this as a topic of conversation for this evening. Change can, for adults and children, create a fear response. And I love this quote here about fear. You know, it's false expectations appearing real, because often when we're facing change, it's actually not the situation that is frightening. It's not what's happening that is causing the stress. It's how we think about what's happening, or our lack of knowledge of what's happening, and the circumstances, or you know, the threat to our certainty and sense of safety and security. So, you know, if any of you are going through change, you might recognize some of these feelings for yourself. For adults, it's a lot easier to reason with yourselves, or to talk about how you feel, or to be able to control a situation or have some sense of control over a situation, than it is for children. Because very often children don't have the vocabulary to be able to explain how they're feeling. They don't have the life experience to know that actually I've been through change before and I came out the other end okay. Or they might not necessarily understand why suddenly things around them have changed, their routine has changed, or mum or dad seem a bit more stressed than normal. Or suddenly, you know, if you're a preschooler, you might go from being at home during the school day with mum or dad, and then suddenly your siblings are at home all day. And, you know, a lot of this can be very, very positive change, but it can be very, very unsettling as well. So as we go through this webinar, we might put up some questions for you. So please do, if you can, engage in the questions and answer them. And if you have any questions yourself, then feel free to post them in chat, and we'll do our best to cover them off this evening. If we can't, then we'll send everybody an email with answers to questions or strategies, whatever it is you're looking for. So fear in all of us can elicit a response that is fight, flight, or freeze. So, and as I said, that fear can be a real threat, a physical threat to our well-being, or it can be a perceived threat. It does so, and often, like I said before, it's how we think about things that creates more stress than necessarily the situation we're coping with at the time. So remembering too that children act out their feelings. So when we don't have necessarily the life experience or the language to be able to communicate how we feel, then children will demonstrate how they feel through their behavior, through how they're acting and how they're behaving. So you will see, if you go through changes of family, you are likely to see some of the responses listed here. So you might find that your child is going through a stage of regression. Now, this is a quite normal response to fear. When we are frightened about something or unsettled, we can retreat back to a time when we felt safe. So regression is where maybe, you know, your child might be out of nappies and might be toileting themselves, but suddenly they start having accidents, or they might start to behave more immature than they normally do behave, or they might show signs of aggression. So, and we often see this where children will lash out, they'll fight more with the siblings, they might hurt other children, or they might hurt themselves as well. So, you know, demonstrating frustration maybe through banging their heads on things, or throwing things, or throwing themselves onto the ground. And, you know, a similar response, but the opposite effect is withdrawal, where, you know, and this very much depends on your child's personality as well, how they actually behave and cope with fear and the behavior you'll see. But for some children, they might not be more outwardly aggressive, but they might withdraw, they might shut off, they might be a little bit sadder and quieter than they normally are. It's just as worrying as a child who is actually expressing outwardly how they're feeling. Children who feel insecure and unsafe, you know, they might go through separation anxiety. You know, it could have been that at one time they were quite happy going to daycare or kindy, and suddenly now they're starting to complain when you're leaving them. So that's really, really common when children are feeling a little bit anxious or insecure, or not settling to sleep the same, waking up in the middle of the night and wanting to come in your bed, or, you know, not wanting to go to sleep, or becoming a bit more hyperactive than they might normally be. Saying no to everything, you know, you know what that feels like yourself when you're feeling a bit negative or low. You're not necessarily in the most positive mood. And, you know, not feeling like you can take on the world. You know, it's no different for children. You know, if they're feeling a little bit insecure and unsafe, then they might have them negative emotions, which means that they're going to be more defiant, they're going to be more negative with you and with other children, most likely. And of course, when we're feeling emotional and stressed, very often we can get to overwhelm really, really quickly. And children who are feeling overwhelmed are going to be more clingy. It's just natural, because they're going to go to the place where they feel the most safe, and that's often with you. They're going to feel more emotional. They might be really close to tears. It might just take one small thing that might not normally bother them, and suddenly they're having a massive meltdown and it feels like the end of the world to them. And also starting to become fussy with food. When we're stressed, we can often feel that, children often feel that, well, people often feel that in their stomach. They get a knot in their stomach. And, you know, that can actually put them off eating. They might, the last thing we think about when we're stressed is eating, when it's a high level of stress and anxiety. Yes, many of us will comfort eat and you know, make our way through a bar of chocolate or a tub of ice cream. That's a different reaction to stress. But for children generally, they will eat less because they are better at listening to their bodies than we are. So they're not as likely to emotionally eat. They're more likely to not eat. And that is because those stress hormones are coursing through their body. And when we are stressed as well, we we actually have a chemical response in our bodies that is caused by a reaction in the brain, and it's known as the amygdala hijack. And this is where the amygdala is a small part of the brain that is almond shaped, and it sits right in the middle of the brain. So if you imagine this is a brain, the amygdala is like my thumb sitting right in the middle. And then over the top of the amygdala is the higher brain, the thinking brain. So you can see that in this diagram here, this part of the brain. It's like the hands over the top of the amygdala. When we have a perceived threat or a real threat, then the thinking brain cuts off from the midbrain, from the feeling brain. So it's very, very difficult for children to follow instructions or to reason or to think logically about whether I am feeling, is this a real threat to me, or is it just something I'm worried about? You know, this is where, when this happens, the amygdala hijack, it's very often when you'll see a tantrum. And have you ever tried to reason with a child who's throwing a tantrum? It's just impossible. It's like they can't hear you. And that's because literally they can't process what you're saying, because the amygdala has hijacked the higher brain. So they've literally flipped their lid, and they're not capable at that stage of actually calming themselves down and following instructions, or even understanding when you're trying to reassure them. So when children are in the throes of an amygdala hijack, it looks like a temper tantrum. They've completely lost it. They're not being naughty. So it's not something that should be punished, because it's actually a reaction in their brain. They can't control it, and it can be very, very frightening for children. So the thing to do when that happens is to stay near. If the child will allow you to hug them, hold them close, then do so. Bring them in close to you, give them a hug, and wait for them to calm down. And then once they're calm, then you can talk to them about what happened and how they feel and what triggered that absolute fear response in them. It's not worth trying while they're throwing a tantrum. Like I say, they're not being naughty. That you just need to allow those hormones to slow through their body, and for them to calm down before you can speak to them and reassure them. And I'm sure I've experienced this many times as a parent, and also in my career in early childhood. It's just a normal part of development, and it can be hugely stressful for parents, but just recognize it as part of growing up and part of learning. And if we can actually teach children how to calm themselves down, and if we can be really empathetic and understanding when children have this kind of reaction, when they're throwing a tantrum, then we're going to support them later in life to self-regulate. But if you basically start shouting at them and punishing them when they're already frightened, then you're just going to make the situation a lot worse. So yes, a temper tantrum is quite an extreme reaction, but it's a normal reaction to fear. So has anybody here had to deal with temper tantrums? I'm sure many of you have. So what might be some behavioral indicators? Because it's not all extreme. It doesn't all lead to temper tantrums. How else might you be able to see that your child could be struggling with change? Well, I talked a little bit before about regression. This is really common, and regression is actually normal in a child's early years and early development. Very often when a child, you'll see a child regress when they're having a massive growth spurt or developmental spurt in their life, and suddenly they'll start to act younger, and it may appear they're being silly, but it's actually normal. And again, this is because they're dealing with something massive. They don't necessarily understand it. So they start to take themselves back to a place when they felt safe. It's not a conscious thing, they start to act younger, they might act like a baby, they might be a bit more clingy, they might suddenly decide they need more help getting dressed, they might decide they can't feed themselves and ask you to help them. And it's just a way for them to deal and to cope with a situation where they're feeling a little bit insecure and they're looking for a lot more support from you. So, and it's, again, it's taken them back to a place where they felt safer. So it's quite normal and it's nothing to worry about, and it will pass. So again, toileting, you might see that they have more accidents with toileting, etc. So don't worry about it when this happens. Just go with the flow, offer more comfort, more reassurance. You know, if they're acting like a baby, then play a game, make it into a game and treat them like a baby, and, you know, help them feel really, really safe and secure. Don't make a big deal out of toileting accidents, because if you do, you're likely to create more stress, which will only exacerbate the situation. So just go, observe your child and just roll with it. If they're showing signs of regression, then just roll with it and play the game with them. And if anyone has any questions, do put them in chat. And like I say, I'm happy to cover them off. Another sign is maybe that they're feeling insecure is being a lot more clingy. And again, a lot of this behavior, all of this behavior, in fact, is normal behavior for preschool children. But it's when you see a change in the behavior. So they might go from being quite independent and happy to, you know, distance from you and play on their own for a while, or happy to say goodbye when you leave for work, and then suddenly they become more clingy. So don't worry about it. It is normal. It just means that they're feeling insecure and need a lot more reassurance. And as part of that is the separation anxiety as well. We deal with this a lot in early childhood, and it's very difficult for parents, I think, when you're dropping your child off at daycare and the child is super stressed and absolutely screaming the place down like it's the end of the world, and you could almost think they were dying. You know, it's that bad, almost like tantrum. So what can happen there is that the parent, and I've done this myself, can find it so stressful that you feel like you need to stay longer and you don't want to leave them, or you don't want to tell them that you're leaving because you know it's going to cause so much more stress and anxiety. When in fact, the best thing you can do is be really honest with your child and to say, look, you know, we're going to kindy, or we're going to daycare, wherever it might be, or you're going to Nana's, you know, I need to go to work. You're going to paint a whole picture of all the amazing things that they're going to do, and be real matter of fact and strong about leaving your child. If you start to feel, or should I stay or should I go, or what should I do, or you start getting upset in front of your child, that's going to make your child feel even more insecure. So the best thing you can do is stick with the plan, tell them in advance what you're going to do, take them to daycare, explain what's going to happen, stay for a minute maybe and just settle them in and chat with the teacher, etc. And then say, when you're going to go, it's important you say goodbye. And you know that your child is likely to get upset, but trust your educator, trust the person that's looking after your child, let them know you're going to go. Make sure you leave at a good time when somebody's there to give one-on-one attention to your child, and say goodbye and walk out. Try not to hesitate, just walk straight out. You might leave the gate and be crying outside yourself, but you've just done the right thing for your child, because the more you delay it, the harder it is for the child, because the anxiety builds up and builds up. And if you hang around for too long, the child's waiting for that time you're going to go. So it just makes it a lot worse. So it's much easier to go to the educator and say, you know, do the handover and make the actual farewell as smooth and as fast as you can make it, because otherwise you're just prolonging the agony. Then you know, obviously it's very distressing for both of you. Most children, once the actual band-aid has been ripped off and mum or dad have left the building, most children recover really, really quickly. In fact, for some, it's almost immediate. But if you're worried, still leave, go to your car or to work, and then phone and check in on your child. And I'm pretty sure 99% of the time you'll be told they're absolutely fine. It's just that moment of separation that's the painful thing, not actually the time you're away, if that makes sense. So another sign of insecurity as well is needing comfort items more. So, you know, your child might have a blankie, or my niece used to have a pet bunny with big long ears, and she used to hold the ears and suck her thumb at the same time. So cute. And you might find that your child's starting to not need that item so much generally, and then suddenly they're really, really dependent on it again. And again, that's just the child seeking a sense of security. So it's important that you allow them to do that. Don't be saying, oh, you don't have that anymore, you're not a baby. You know, allow them to find security wherever they can. And also we'll talk about strategies to help them through this very soon as well. And again, bedwetting is another sign of insecurity that links to many of these it does link to regression as well. Another sign of stress is bad dreams. So, you know, if a child's worrying going to bed, or they've had things playing on their minds, sometimes, you know, that can result in them having bad dreams or night terrors. And, you know, as distressing as that is, it's quite normal. And again, our children just need lots of love and empathy, and to build that sense of security again. And another sense of feeling insecure is being possessive about belongings. Very often when children have their sense of security threatened, they start to fear losing things. They might talk about what happens if you don't come back, mummy, or what happens if daddy doesn't come back, or what happens if I lose this, etc. And they start, you can see that's a stress thing. They start to worry about things that might happen. And again, it's that fear response, the false expectations appearing real. So, you know, they start to worry about things that could happen because they're losing that sense of safety and security. All quite normal. We do this as adults as well. So again, our children need more love, more hugs, build more empathy, and for us to build that sense of security back up for them as well. And there is a saying that, you know, sometimes the hardest child to love is the one that needs it the most. You know, sometimes children will seek attention and seek affection in the most negative of ways, but all they're doing is communicating actually that they need support. And it's really important that we give them that support when they do need it, and not see it as naughty behavior. It's challenging for sure. It's challenging for the parents, but they're not being naughty. It's just normal development. And of course, when our children are overwhelmed, they're going to be more emotional than usual. I know I am when I'm overwhelmed. So, you know, they are humans, they are little people. So, you know, they need more reassurance, because, again, they don't always understand what's happening or why it's happening. When they're overwhelmed, again, we can get that with stress. We get that knot in our tummy or a lump in our throat, and it can put us off food. If children have gone off their food, if your child's off their food because, you know, they normally eat really well, and you know that there's been a lot of change in your life, and suddenly your child's become a fussy eater, or they're refusing to eat, or they refuse to eat at the meal times when you expect them to eat, the best thing to do is not make a big deal of it. Never, ever force your child to eat, because children are much better at listening to their bodies than we are. So you're sending the wrong message if you are forcing or bribing children to eat. The best thing to do is to have plenty of healthy snacks available. So, you know, all food is good food. So we want to make sure that we're creating healthy mindset around food and healthy eating habits. but never make a fight over food, because you will always lose. Because you can't force feed a child. It's abuse for one thing, but you literally can't force feed a child. So if you make it into a fight, you will lose for sure. So the best thing to do is not fight over it. Offer healthy meals and healthy snacks. And if it's your child will eat, and most children will eat what they need to eat throughout the day. So if it becomes an extreme problem, then visit your GP. But most of the time, it's not an issue. Children will eat a healthy, balanced diet if they're offered one. So, and if you fight over food, then you make meal times a battleground, and it becomes a cycle, a really negative cycle that can create bad habits and mindset around food, and nobody wants that. So again, children can become very clingy when they're overwhelmed, because what do we do when we're overwhelmed? We seek comfort. So, and again, they're going to go to that safe space, that safe person, for the comfort that they need. And of course, a short fuse. Just like adults, when we're stressed and overwhelmed, you know, our patience, our tolerance, our ability to cope with certain situations is reduced significantly. And it's the same for children. So again, if anyone has any questions, do put them in chat. So another challenge of challenging behavior you might see is aggression and withdrawal. And we talked about that a little bit before too. So aggression and withdrawal is a bit like, we all know aggression. You'll see, you know, if they've got a short fuse, you're going to see they're fighting with their siblings a lot more. They're kicking, they're hitting, they're biting. And this is just all signs that they're not coping, that they're stressed and they're unable to handle their emotions. So they are going to lash out in those situations because they're feeling frustration. And these are real powerful emotions, you know, fear, anger, frustration. All these very, very strong emotions for anybody can be very overwhelming for children. So we need to give them the tools to be able to deal with these emotions and to be able to deal with these challenges a lot more positively. And to be honest, I'm sure, like me, many of you will know adults who struggle to deal with these powerful emotions. So, you know, we need to be kind to our children, and we need to actually expect that they're going to get it wrong a lot of the time. And that's okay. It's normal part of learning and development. And like I say, you know, big emotions are sometimes frightening, and every life experience is an emotional experience. So just think about everything that your child is demonstrating that you might label as negative, and it might be challenging for you to deal with. And of course it is, I understand that too, but these are such fantastic opportunities to teach. They're fantastic opportunities to support your child to build coping strategies, and to build resilience, to build some of those dispositions that are going to support them for the rest of their lives. So try and see it when you're struggling, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling stressed because your child is really playing up, so to speak. Just try and see the positive side, that it's an amazing opportunity to teach, and you're teaching one of the most important things as well. So let's look at some strategies that might support your child through change. So the first one is, where possible, alleviate the fear. So, you know, sometimes change is really quick. So I get that, but most of the time we have some notice that, you know, things are going to change. We're going to go into lockdown in a few days, or, you know, we're going to move house next week. So we've got time to talk to the children before the change happens. So if you can, talk about change in advance and offer reassurance and answer questions as well. Making things into stories. Talk about times when you experienced change and how you felt at the time. So use every opportunity to talk about feelings, to talk about how you felt. Maybe you were scared when you were moving house, when you were a young child, or even when you're an adult. And how did you cope with that? So we want our children to understand that feeling the fear and the anxiety is okay, it's normal. But how do we cope with it? How do we deal with it? And if you talk about the change in advance, you then give your child the opportunity to ask questions. And you'll find they come up with such crazy questions, like if you're moving house, they might say, well, will daddy still be coming? Or will my brother or my sister still be coming when we move house? That might seem like a crazy question to you. But if you think about it from their perspective, they've never had this life experience before. This is all completely new. And they don't know anybody. They have no memory of this happening before. They don't know other people that have moved house to know that they take their whole family. So, imagine having a big change like moving house and not having the experience to draw upon and not having the ability to control it yourself. You can see how really scary it could be for children. So the more you can talk about it in advance and the more you can reassure the child that, we're moving house, but we're taking everything with us. You're taking your bed, we're taking your toys, we're taking your pet dog. And literally, if you need to, list everything that your child cares about that we're going to take when we move house. And hopefully in that list is their brother and sister, if that's the case. But, really take the time to listen to the questions they ask, because that's going to give you some indication as to what's playing on their mind or what they might be frightened about. So, yeah. And, I remember my son asking, will I take my bed? Because he didn't know whether he'd have a bed to sleep in the new house, because of course he wouldn't be in the same bedroom. So it's really important that we do that. And there are so many great children's books out there as well that you can buy that talk about these experiences. So reading books too is a really good way to do this. Making up stories, even if you've not had the life experience yourself, enough to be able to make up a story, a fictional story around what might happen, what happened to, I don't know, somebody, your fictional character, when they moved house and how they coped. So you can make it into a real fun conversation. I'm using the example of moving house because that's easier. But if we're going to be in lockdown, so you're not going to kindy for the next week, then talk about what you might do. Talk about how the routine might change. Talk about the things that are going to be different in that week or month or 3 months, however long it might be. And talk about the things that are going to be the same as well. It's really important that you do that. Don't just assume they know that nothing else is going to change. So the more you can prepare, the better. Provide opportunities to talk about feelings and grow your child's emotional literacy. And I say this about everything, not just through change. The more we can give, the more vocabulary we can give our children for them to express themselves, the better. You're going to build their social competence and their emotional intelligence, which is really going to help them. It's going to help them tremendously when they start school. So use any opportunity to grow their emotional literacy. So talk about how they feel and ask about how they feel as well. And if they're struggling for words, then give them some words, give them some examples and some scenarios so that they can maybe choose the one that best fits. Talk about where they feel the sadness in their body. Do you have a sore tummy? Well, if they have a sore tummy, they're likely to be feeling anxious or stressed. So you can use that language with them. Do you have a heavy heart? Do you have a lump in your throat? Do you have tears? And introduce all these this emotional vocabulary, age appropriately, of course. So you might start with the 5 major emotions and then introduce others as you go on. But the more you can do that, the better, because you're giving them the tools to be able to express themselves. which is very, very empowering. And then keep as much consistency as you can. Yes, you might have a huge change in your life, but you're still going to be getting up every morning and cleaning your teeth. You're still going to be eating breakfast, and you might have a play group or forest school or something happening in the morning. You're going to have lunch. So keep as much predictability in the routine of the day as you possibly can control, because that gives the child a sense of safety and security. So yes, I'm going to move house, or yes, my brothers and sisters are going to be at home for the next month, but I'm still going to be able to do this, 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 and this. So, you know, for preschool children, it really helps if you can use visual images. So, you know, you can create something like on this screen, you can create a little routine card. You can even have separate cards, and we're given a free resource after this webinar that you can use to do this. You can have separate cards where they can make choices, or you can have a sequence where that, you know, they can see that once, if you have them separately and you have them maybe on a wall or a magnet board or something, that once we've cleaned our teeth, that card comes off until tomorrow, or you move it to a different place. And then they know then this next card is what we do next, and so throughout the day. That can build a sense of security because A, it's predictable, but B, they feel that they've got some control over what happens next. Even if it's just knowing that they can move the card, they feel a sense of control and autonomy over decisions. And if you get them to plan using them same cards as well, that's a great way to empower them, to helping them to make choices around what's happening. And if we're able to make choices for ourselves, then again, that's a lot more empowering. It creates a positive feeling towards what we're going to do next, just as it does for adults. Well, as it happens, this is the next slide. So, you know, where possible, offer opportunities for choices. So the more that we try and force something on children, the more we give them to resist. So, and resist they will, of course, because they're trying to gain control of their lives and that sense of autonomy. So if we don't give them anything to resist, then there's less resistance there. There's less reason for them to be defiant or to push back. So the best way to make your day go easier and give less for the child to resist is offer many opportunities for choices. So for example, if you need to be getting out the door and you want your child to put their shoes on, and you know it's normally a fight, then don't say put your shoes on. Say, oh, which shoes would you like to wear today? So very often, most of the time, that then children will just make a choice for themselves, and there you've done it. You know, you might not have them in the shoes you want them to wear, but we have to pick our battles, don't we? So some things are just not worth worrying about. So, and like I said before, use pictures and images to show a sequence of events, because children can't read yet. Most children, most preschool children, and a picture paints 1,000 words. So it's much easier to use visual images, which is why we've created that free resource for you too. Really important that you take time to play with your child. Children make sense of their experiences through play, and it can be hilarious actually, you know, as a home-based educator or working in preschools, to listen to children when they're playing in the role play corner, for example, and they're engaged in imaginary play. It's so funny, some of the things that they say. So it's real fun to listen and to observe as they act out what they experience in the world. So if you engage in play with your child and you really listen to what they're acting out and what they're saying, it's a great opportunity for you to, yes, build their vocabulary, but more importantly, to build that sense of connection. They're feeling frightened, they're feeling insecure. The more opportunities you can have to really connect with your child and really get to understand them, the better. And play is just the best way to do that. So you'll learn a lot about how your child is feeling and where they're at through engaging in play. And that's how children learn. As Einstein says, it's the highest form of research. So use it for research yourself and just gauge where your child is at through engaging in play. And also drawings. Drawings help children to express their thoughts and feelings, and drawing is often used in all kinds of therapy with children because, again, it's a bit like play, you know, children will make meaning, they'll express their thoughts and feelings through pictures. So if you can sit and draw with your child and offer them many opportunities for drawing, again, they're making sense of their world and their experiences, and they're also communicating how they feel. And you can tell by the images, you know, or is your child who is quite good at art suddenly starting to be quite aggressive with the pen and paper, and everything's suddenly black and everyone's scribbled out, everyone's got sad faces when normally there'd be really happy smiley pictures. You know, it gives you a real good indication as to how your child is feeling. And remember too that we can't control necessarily how we feel. And that's certainly not when we're preschoolers. It's very hard for us to even understand what our emotions are telling us. So be kind to yourself, because sometimes you'll struggle too, and you'll be experiencing all of these emotions and feelings. But be kind to your child because they're going through an immense amount of stress and anxiety. Most children are at the moment with all these changes, with COVID, lockdowns, etc., etc. So it's really important that we don't stress over the small things. We don't make a big deal over little things that might be going wrong. The fact your child won't get dressed, won't wear the right things, won't eat their dinner. All of this is going to be happening right now, and that's okay. Just don't sweat the small stuff. Don't give too much to resist, and just go with the flow as far as you possibly can. And clearly, you do still need to have boundaries, of course. So I'm not saying just release all boundaries. You know, we do have expectations around behavior. So it's not okay to be hurting other people. It's not okay to disrespect the environment. So, you know, think about respect for ourselves and each other and the environment. You know, have your rules and your boundaries, but just don't sweat the small stuff, because this too will pass. And just support your child in building their emotional literacy and the ability to self-regulate. And the more children experience change and they get through the other side, it grows their resilience and their ability to cope with change. And that's really important. It's a really important lifelong skill. So, and really that's the end of our strategies. I do want to say that if there is anything that you would like us to cover off on our next webinar, or if you have any questions, then please do. There's no questions at the moment in chat, but if you do have any questions, now's your moment before we close off this webinar. And yeah, like I say, just message us if there's anything that you want us to cover for the next webinar. And also, I am pleased to announce that we do have a free resource. And, you know, I've talked a few times this evening about having a routine, having some, what am I saying? Having a predictable rhythm, having a routine, having some certainty around what's going to happen throughout the day. And for children, having a visual resource that can give them some sense of control and power over what they do when they do it is really, really useful. So there's a set of routine activity cards that will be sent out to you, and you just simply cut along the lines here as indicated, make them into a card set, and then you can build up your child's daily activities and routines from this and give them that sense of control and autonomy. So if we're all good, I shall farewell you all and say see you next month. Our next webinar will be on the 27th of January. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you everybody for joining, and see you next time.